I'm sure you've seen the highlights now of Kevin Lee's PFL debut. It did not go well. He got finished in the first round by Gadsy. He was a huge underdog. Gadsy was like a minus 1,000 favorite. And I think Kevin Lee got totally screwed over here. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. My name is James Lynch. So if you haven't seen the highlights, I'll show you real quick. Not going to have the audio just in case YouTube boots me off here. But you just see there, Gadsy dropped Lee a few times and then eventually gets the TKO finish. And, you know, this is a guy that should be in the UFC. He's a very, very, very good fighter. Maybe one of the best fighters outside the UFC that the UFC should be bringing over here if you can get out of that PFL contract. But what are we doing here? So there's a couple kind of shady things that was going on with this fight. So first and foremost, Gadsy and Kevin Lee had the same manager. It's a manager I've been very outspoken about on my shows before. This looked like a fight to basically build up Gadsy, and I don't think Kevin Lee had the right people around him to be like, yeah, this isn't a good situation for you. Now look, the blame does fall on Kevin Lee as well. He should not be taking fights like this. First off, Kevin Lee hadn't fought at lightweight in a very long time. I want to say it was not since the Charles Oliveira fight. I think that was the last time he fought at 155. Yeah, that was in 2020. That was 5 years ago was the last time he fought at lightweight. He fought Diego Sanchez at 165. Remember that, the catchweight fight. But outside of that, he has pretty much fought at 170 going forward. So you've got a fighter who has a history of injuries, history of knee problems, and also had a history of, you know, really hard weight cuts. Him moving down to lightweight at this stage in his career, I think was a really bad idea. So you already know going in, Kevin Lee's not going to be his best because I don't think while he performed well at lightweight throughout his career, I think at this stage in his career, it's just too much of a cut. He's an in-betweener. He really is a 165er. I think that if they ever did that weight class, that would have been perfect for him. But yeah, so Lee's already kind of going in by this. And this is where I don't think his manager did him any favors. And Kevin Lee doesn't necessarily disagree. So here's the tweet he has the next day. He says, "I'm not a coward. At least I can say I tried. I shot for the stars." And so at least, you know, again, he's admitting that, you know, he took the fight. Like, again, at the end of the day, he took the matchup. He has to take some of the blame for the way the fight went because he accepted the fight. He could have just said no. He says, "My legs aren't what they used to be. I can't absorb shots anymore. And honestly, I don't know if it will come back." And yeah, I mean, it was not fun to watch. But here's an interesting comment that this person, not the real John Jones, obviously, he says, "Kevin, I think you need to have a real convo with Ali and ask him why Gadsy was the fight you had to take for your first in PFL. He could have easily got you a fight on the finale card in August against a more suitable opponent in your debut. In my opinion, he set you up to make Gadsy look good, get a good high-level name on his record." I know. So even he knows it was not a good situation. Like, what makes this worse is the fact that his manager also represents Gadsy. So it's kind of like using one of his guys to make another guy look better. I don't like that stuff. And again, what's the point in doing a fight where you've got an opponent who's a minus 1100 in a main event? That's not fun for anyone. Yes, you got the highlight reel finish. Yes, you build him up. I don't even think it helps him. Just because he beat Kevin Lee, has barely fought over the last couple of years, who's dealt with multiple injuries, did retire at one point, only to now come out of retirement. It just didn't make sense to do this fight. So I don't think this helped anyone. And, you know, I'm not alone here. If you look in the comments here, everyone kind of knew what was going on here. Shame on you, PFL, for feeding Kevin Lee to a guy on an 11-fight win streak, on a 3-fight KO streak prior to fighting Lee. You know, who expects a different result? You know, and then obviously you have the fans who are making fun of Kevin Lee and all that. But like, this is not fun to watch, seeing mismatches like this. And UFC does this too sometimes, but like, just seeing fights like this, it was just bad matchmaking. But, you know, again, going back to the manager and how I think Kevin Lee was screwed over here, you know, I just think Lee has got to take what he can get. And I think in this case, like Kevin Lee could have just fought on the regional scene like he did his last fight. He fought a guy in Thiago Oliveira. There's no relation to Charles Oliveira. He fought at Lights Out Championship. He gets a first round win. These are the type of fights, if Kevin wants to continue fighting, that he should be taking, and they should be at 170 and not 155. But I think his manager, I think the people around him knew that. They knew that this was going to be a bad fight for Kevin Lee, and they didn't step in and say anything. And I'll even go back a fight or two further. Remember him coming back to the UFC. Remember he left the UFC, signed with Eagle FC. You know, it was this big deal. Obviously, Eagle FC kind of shutting down operations on the North American side after a certain period here. And then he was out of work. And then Kevin Lee got back into the UFC. Well, they give him Renat, which made no sense whatsoever for Kevin Lee to come back and fight an absolute killer like this, because prior to that, I know Renat hasn't had a ton of success since then. Or he had actually I shouldn't say that. He's had a bunch of wins since then. But my whole point is that, like, you know, Renat has not looked like sort of the killer he looked like when he fought Kevin Lee. But here's the thing. Renat was coming off that dominant victory over Brian Battle. Like, you could see that this guy was an absolute killer. And Kevin Lee, and now granted, Renat's not rep by the same manager as him. However, I don't think he did Kevin any favors. Like if Kevin's coming back in the UFC after such a long layoff, because he had the fight with Diego Sanchez in 2022 in March, he's fighting in 2023, long layoff, and you have to fight Renat. Like that wasn't a good fight for him. And that's again where your management and your coaches and the people around you should be like, yeah, maybe don't take that fight. I don't think he had a choice. I think the whole thing was kind of set up by his manager to be like, yeah, we'll get you in the UFC, but they're not going to do you any favors. Because realistically, like that was a fight to build up Renat, and it certainly did. Renat was able to, obviously win that, and he's gone on to great things ever since. He had the draw against Zaleski and then, a couple wins after that. But this made Renat look good. It made Kevin Lee look bad. So, and I know this is the fight game, and I know you got to take fights when you got to take them. I just feel like Kevin's a guy that, at one point was a really big name in the UFC. Remember, look at this, run that he had, coming in the UFC, obviously losing to Ali Quinta, but then he gets, 4 wins in a row, had the kind of fluke loss to Leandro Santos. And then after that, went on to, get some really good performances, really good wins. Michael Chiesa was a great win. Lost to Tony Ferguson, but ended up winning the first round of that fight. Beat Edson Barbosa. Right? I know he missed weight for that one. Gregor Gillespie, like he's had some good wins and he had a good UFC career. I just think it's sad that at this point he's kind of being used to build up other fighters. And I don't think Lee was, really even at that point or should be in that point. And I think, again, his manager's not doing him any favors here. So yeah, I don't know. I just didn't like the way that whole thing went down. It reminds me a bit of when the UFC matched up Paddy Pimblett with Tony Ferguson. Like we knew Paddy was going to win the fight, and it was the UFC's way of using Tony Ferguson to make Paddy look better. You didn't need to do that. Turns out Paddy's actually a pretty good fighter. We saw that in the last fight with Michael Chandler. Like you don't need to do that to certain fighters. To me, it's a cheap way to kind of fool casual fans and say, look, this guy's so good, he beat Kevin Lee. Like there'll be a casual fan out there watching this going, well, he beat Kevin Lee. He looked outstanding, when in reality, you're not getting the same Kevin Lee that fought Michael Chiesa or Tony Ferguson. You're getting the, 2 surgeries later on his knees, been out for a while, has a hard time making 155 Kevin Lee. That's the Kevin Lee you're getting. So yeah, I didn't like this. Shame on PFL as well for putting, I agree with the guy down here. Bad on PFL for making that fight, because obviously it's trying to build up Gadsy. Bad on the manager, and just bad on Lee's team. Like where's, Killcliff stepping in here and being like, yeah, this probably isn't a good idea to fight a guy that's a minus 1100 here. You know what I mean? Like, and it's PFL. Like there was no reason, like they have fighters on the roster that would have put up a more competitive fight or had a better fight. And, again, like to make your debut and you're already fighting like their champion. Like, I just think that's, just bad look overall. So personally, if I was managing Lee's career going forward, I would say do 170 going forward. Yes, he's going to be undersized, but you're not susceptible to getting finished as much if you're doing it that. But personally, I wouldn't mind Lee just stepping away and doing it. It sounds like his business is going well with his restaurant. You don't need to take this much brain damage, and you don't need to be someone else's, cheap prop highlight reel, going forward. So yeah, I don't know. I felt the need to do this because I've interviewed Kevin for years. He's a great guy. I know he gets a lot of flack. People say, oh, you said he was going to out-wrestle Khabib. Who cares? He was talking trash back in the day. You want that sometimes with fighters instead of fighters not saying anything. Lee was a good self-promoter, good guy. I just think he deserved a lot better than what we saw on Friday with PFL. And again, comes down to management, coaches, the PFL. I think everyone worked against Kevin, and that's the result we saw. And it didn't help anyone. It didn't help Gadsy at all. Yeah, you got a highlight reel win. Good for you. You beat a guy who was a plus 800. Doesn't solve anything. So yeah, bad look there overall. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. I know I'm going to get people in the comments being like, oh, Kevin Lee's terrible. Good for you. We all know you're insecure. You wish you could fight. That's why you're talking smack on a professional fighter like this. But for the rest of us, the people that actually have, a little bit of empathy and common sense, I didn't like this, and I'm sure a lot of you didn't either. So if you feel the same way I do, let me know in the comments. Would love to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.